I'm Dave Bryant, and our interviewee for this third Thursday's Ornette and Primetime Oral History is Mr. Matt Lavelle, who studied informally, as I did many years ago, with Ornette, but I think mostly within maybe the last 15, 20 years of his life, and was also a very prominent collaborator with Mr. Burn Nix, guitarist with Primetime, and played in his quartet for many years. So Matt's got a lot to share with us, and so I'm looking forward to hearing some of it myself. But Matt, I guess let us know.
Hey, Dave.
Tell us how you hooked up with Burn. How did that come about?
So Burn, the first time I ever talked to Burn was he was playing with Jamil Moondoc's Just Grew Orchestra.
Uh-huh.
And I was subbing for Roy Campbell. So I got to play with Burn in Jamil's orchestra. And we talked briefly, but it was very like, we didn't really know each other. I was like, hey, man. And it was kind of like a little bit of small talk, but we didn't really hook up.
Right.
And then years later, my buddy Francois was in Burn's trio. And they used to rehearse at Francois' kitchen all the time, in Hell's Kitchen. And so Francois was one of my best friends. So I seen what was happening, and I used to see Burn a lot and talk to him a little bit. And then I started putting the energy out to both Burn and Francois that, if you ever need a trumpet in that, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I felt like I knew both of them well enough that I could just put it out there. Not like, like I really want to be in the band.
Right.
But I put it out there and didn't know what would happen. But they must have talked about it, and then Burn had me over for an audition/session. It was a session, but it was definitely like, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And but we were good from that very first session, though. We were good, and I think after that session, while we were packing up and stuff, Burn said, you're in. Like, I'm gonna make this a quartet, and that was the beginning of that band.
Right. Well, I know whenever Burn talked to me about you guys, I think it's fair to say he was justifiably proud of you guys. He was like, that's my band, that's my quartet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he was very much that way about it. And I was telling him how much I had enjoyed your playing when I'd heard you guys play, and he goes, oh, yeah, he's good.
Yeah, I really miss Burn. Well, we tried to play every week, no matter what. And because we could go to Francois had drums in his kitchen and he had a bass amp. So Burn would try to make a rehearsal every week. And every now and then it didn't work out, but for 4 or 5 years we were pretty faithful to that session, which would probably be anywhere from 3 to 4 hours each time.
Yeah.
And and like any session, we would be working on stuff, but as the session would go on, it would become more and more open and of a lighter mood. But we were definitely trying to learn Burn's tunes and his concept. And some of them we would just do them over and over and over and over, 3 or 4 times in a row with solos and everything,
Yeah, no, Burn was, that's one thing. I don't know if he got it from Ornette or if he came by it, that was part of his natural temperament too, but he could hit that rehearsal and just take something and loop it over and over and over, and just to get it so you get it inside,
Yeah. Well, a lot of his tunes too, to work out some of the lines, You know, Bern had his notation. I mean, having seen the original Ornette sheets, it wasn't that open as Ornette's, but it still had to be figured out and learned.
Right.
You know, and then and he would make decisions and arrangements. You know, and he'd have some instructions. Sometimes he didn't talk that much about harmolodics. Every now and then he would say something. It was more about the arrangement.
Yeah.
You know, if the one time he really was like, he flexed on me was, rightfully so, because in the middle of a solo, I just played Night in Tunisia for no reason whatsoever. And this is some kind of problem that I have, that I should be exercised from, because I did the same thing to Sabir Mateen once, and he was like, and rightfully so. It was like, why would you do that? And that's the one time Bern actually got mad at me. He was like, nah, man. He said, we don't do that shit, man. He was like, and I was like, I didn't really think much of it, but then I realized that it was just so out of context, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one reason I think Burden wouldn't have talked about harmolodic so much is he was so much in on the ground floor. And I think he was one of the guys that who he was really went into the making of it.
Yeah.
So, and I think and because he had absorbed so much and because he had inspired so much of it and had midwifed so much of it himself, that it was not just the way he played it, it was who he was.
Yeah.
He didn't have to try. He just had to be burned.
Yeah. He would tell us Ornette stories from time to time that would just, we would just love to hear that stuff. And he liked to joke around a lot too. But when the music was playing, it was like, I really think about this a lot, is you spend a lot of time playing with someone. Like with you and Ornette, if you really go that deep and spend the time, that you develop an interaction and an understanding of each other's language, their sound language, and then you get to the point where there's deeper and deeper levels where you start co-creating in a way that's I don't think, it's like a real human thing that I don't think that can be taught in schools and stuff. It's like really when you really do the time and it becomes a personal thing. And Francois had that with Bern too.
Yeah. No, and Reggie Sylvester, the drummer, yeah, all of you guys.
So because I guess from playing together so much, and when I think back, I'm just baffled that sometimes some of the things that I listen to is that there was no keys and there was no chords.
Yeah.
But Bern would be comping.
Right. Yeah.
And it would work all the time. Yeah. And he really, really hooked me up because I was at a place where I was trying to figure myself out musically, and I have always had a hard time really being myself. Like you were just talking with Fred. I've always had a real hard time being myself and musically connecting with other musicians. Like when I really double down and do myself, sometimes it just doesn't vibe with other musicians. And I've done so much sideman work over the years that I would often feel obligated to play the way that I think somebody wants me to play.
Yeah,
I have to play the right music in this context. I have to always, if I'm playing for someone else, I always want to give them what I think they want, which a lot of times in this kind of music, no one ever actually says. No, a lot of times, I'm a leader now myself, but I don't usually tell somebody to play a specific way during a solo. So Bern was definitely the leader, without a doubt. But he gave me that space, though. It was almost like the sanction to be myself. You know, like I could really do the things that I really like to do, play the way I really want to play, and he was cool with it. I mean, it worked. However our musical languages work, they functioned. Yeah. They were compatible, and it's something that's hard to find. It's something you got to build with other musicians over time, and just like relationships in life. Yeah. You know, and you know, that musical connection that I had with him is gone. You know, I mean, I can develop musical connections with other people, but when I listen back to some of that stuff, I'm like, you know, I'll never hook up with somebody like that way and make those sounds again. Yeah. You know?
No, when you lose somebody like that, there's not another one coming back 5 minutes later.
You know, and when they're so original, you know, like Burns, I don't want to call them voicings, but when he would play multiple notes at once, you know, right. He had his own chord language, but it was harmolodic, and it was always evolving and always different, but still part of the language, you know, and I miss that sound, you know.
You know, it's funny, on that YouTube video where it's that early version of Prime Time with Byrne, with James Blood and Ronald Shannon Jackson and Fred Williams and DiNardo, when I first listened to it, I thought, well, which guitar player is that? Because there was one that was taking a lead role, and it didn't sound like either Byrne or Blood. I thought, who is that? And I finally figured out it was Byrne, but it was a more active Byrne than I had remembered, a little notier Byrne. And I always wondered about that transition that must have taken place from where he refined his voice into something more personal and at the same time something more, with Byrne I hesitate to say economical, because there was so much there even with so few notes.
Yeah.
But I know I said to Ornette one time, and when I was first starting out, you know, studying with him, and I said, you know, I'd really like to be able to play those short, pithy phrases like Byrne. Because the thing that's so hard is, not only do you have to construct those phrases and conceive of them and kind of reduce them down from the head, you know, from the melody, because he could take that and just reduce it down to like a 3 or 4 note cell that seemed to suggest the entire melody, you know.
Sure.
But not only would he do that, but then with it being so short, you'd have to place it just right for it to pop, you know. And with all that stuff going on in Prime Time, you had to worry about where something lie harmonically, where you put it rhythmically, and even thinking about it in normal terms, whether you're, say, in front of the beat, behind the beat, or whatever. There are a lot of beats going on, and each one of them had a before and after, had a above and, you know, in front and behind. So he was a master of that kind of placement, of taking that kind of phrase and just playing it in such a way that it really projected and resonated. And I told Ornette I wanted to be able to do that, and he said, the first thing he said was, I said, I wish I could play those short, pithy phrases like Byrne. He said, and he looked at me like, you dummy. He said, well, maybe your phrases are longer. And I was like, right. Okay, yeah, that's good. You know, in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, I wish I could do that. Same way you think, oh, I wish I could play those, you know, Charlie Parker licks or whatever it is, you know. But I, you know, I kind of wanted to drill down to see what that was about, and I'm certainly not there yet. But it's something that sounds so simple, and yet it's so deep. And I wondered about that process, and I've asked him about it. And I remember him telling me, he said, well, you know, I was in that situation where there was just so much sound going on. And he said, I thought, well, how few notes can I get away with, that kind of a thing? How much can I pare this down and still have some resonance and some weight to it? Yeah. So did you ever get anything from him about that process of whatever that transition was that resulted in that man of few notes presence he had?
You know, it was the way he talked and was a lot like the way he played.
Yeah.
But it was hard to, there were certain walls on certain levels where you couldn't really get in. You know, there was always a little bit of a mystery kind of thing. And he was a writer.
Yeah.
He was studying writing, and he did a lot of writing that has not made the public view. He's an interesting writer. He had like a real voice as a writer. And but it was the way he wrote was a lot like the way he played. You know, there was great care for each note and great care for each word. Yeah. And all the words, you could tell he really spent the time. Yeah. It's interesting use of the words, and there's no wasted or unnecessary words. You know?
It's funny, as a conversationalist, he was a great conversationalist and was one of those people who just seemed to be able to talk to anybody about any subject.
Yeah.
And hold forth.
Yeah.
And just, really had a lot of knowledge there in the reservoir.
Yeah.
To draw on, but just very poised in that way socially that you don't always see. And at the same time, in this business, you run into so many, not sure what I want to call it, like fake eccentrics,
Sure.
And it's like Byrne, everything about Byrne that was unique was 100% genuine.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was like, there was nothing put on at all. That whatever it was, like you say, it was that way in every note, every word, every mannerism,
Yep.
just his whole vibe. Everything was totally consistent.
And then the other real gift that Byrne gave me by having me in that environment, in that space with him, was he let me really see if I could really play the alto clarinet, because I'm primarily known as a trumpet. I don't know about now, but a lot of people see me as a trumpet player, and I am. That's my first, and it's not really my main voice anymore. But there's a lot of situations where trumpet is the horn.
Yeah.
And especially large ensemble or anything with power. And Byrne's original idea was for me to play flugelhorn and trumpet, but the sound that he heard was the flugel. And I regret that I didn't record more flugelhorn on the record that we did. But early on, I asked him, I only brought the trumpet and the flugelhorn for the first few weeks, but I wanted to bring the alto clarinet. And I asked him permission, really.
Right.
Are you hearing this? Because, what do you think? And if he said no, I'd be like, okay, that's cool. Right. He said, it's cool if you can hit on hard as if you can hit that as hard as you hit on trumpet, then it's all good.
Right.
So I was like, okay. So that was kind of like a creative challenge, and also an acceptable standard that I had to be able to do that. And then he gave me the space to try to pull it off.
Yeah.
Because we got together every week, and I wouldn't just do all alto, but that really gave me an opportunity to work that out in an environment with a mentor, veteran figure that I didn't have before, because of all the sideman work that I have done over the years, it's usually as a trumpet player. Right. So that was another gift, really. Like encouragement, sanction. You could call it validation, or believing in somebody. And then on negative capability, when we play less is more which we're gonna play tonight.
Yeah.
There's a moment on there where he really like created almost an entire other piece for the alto clarinet using his tune on that record. When if anybody checks it out, and you know he after we had done it for a while, he started to bring that sound into his world. And then he create. Byrne was great at. I keep want to say comping, but it's not comping.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's like he was a master at listening to what someone does, and then coming back and joining you, like where he's supporting what you're doing, but he's adding to it at the same time. You know. But he's really good at that.
Yeah.
And he can swing. Like Byrne really, you know, he in his own musical universe, like when he wasn't in prime time, he had that he brought out more of the swing side, but it's still free. It's totally free. Right. But he has this swing thing, and that's part of the way that we connected. And then he's really good at supporting and creating that kind of a vibe, you know. But he would always switch up in his quartet to have primetime like moments. He had this tune called "Under the Volcano," and it was kind of funky, but it was not swing, and it was not some straight ahead jazz thing or anything like that. It was definitely harmolodic, and it was him. But I always felt like this was like his not overtly like here's my primetime piece, but it was something dealing with primetime energy. That makes any sense, you know?
Yeah, I know playing with him, it was very easy, I thought, maybe just me, but I thought it was very easy to overplay with him. And because he was so refined, you know, in his note choices and stuff, that I would find myself on occasion getting ahead of the bus, you know, and we'd just shut him down, you know, and I'd be like, nope, I've got to find out from him where my space is, you know, and take that. But I always thought you were so good at playing so strong on the trumpet and yet not falling into that trap of overplaying.
Yeah, I think it's my I think every trumpet player in the world that plays any kind of solos has to process their relationship with Miles Davis and the way Miles uses space. And, you know, I would never try to play directly like Miles, you know. But the one thing I really did absorb from Miles is the breathing and letting it happen, and, you know, and that's always been part of my thing, which has caused me friction in a lot of free jazz or a lot of improvisation, because I'm trying to breathe and I'm trying to have conversations. You know, sometimes it's sometimes the vibe is not like that. You know, sometimes you got to hit and go hard.
Right.
You know, and I like to do that too. But even when the rhythm sections are just exploding, I still am looking to join with the drums and be part of what they're doing. Then just, you know, do the power trumpet thing. Where you just, you know, if you do that, it's just all about your power and your technique. You know, I've always wanted to go another way, because I figured maybe it's unexplored territory, but I've been in orchestral situations with double drums and roaring orchestras. Like, there's this record called Spontaneous with William Parker, and I was in the Little Huey Music Orchestra. And I started soloing while there was two drummers who were really starting to pick it up, and the entire orchestra was just roaring, you know? And I ended up, in the way I interpret the experience is, I ended up in a call and response with the entire orchestra. you know? Like, I wasn't just gonna go in there and just try to like sail over everybody like some kind of comet or anything like that. I wanted to get inside what everybody was doing as a group.
Right.
And the dangerous part about something like that is sometimes there's musicians with so much power that you can get steamrolled.
Yeah.
You know, like some drummers are so strong that if you try to, you know, throw a phrase at them, and on trumpet you have a fair amount of power. You can be like,
right.
check this out, boom.
Right, right.
You know, there are some drummers that'll be like, oh, okay, bam.
Right.
And they can, you know, come back with something so strong, it's like you get the wind knocked out of you, you know. And I've encountered some really strong, powerful musicians over the years. But Byrne was that different kind of strength.
Yes, well put, yes.
You know, it wasn't about power. He had his moments. He had his moments when he was like, you know, definitely like going up and pushing. But he's a sensitive guy, a soft-spoken guy, you know, and that environment really helped me grow as a musician.
Well, when I told Ornette I wanted to play those shorter phrases like Byrne, that's the other thing he said to me was, he said, well, you can't do that just by leaving notes out. He said, that's got to come from a place of conviction. That's the way you want to play. And I was like, oh, I think this is bigger than I thought it was, you know.
Wow.
So how did you encounter Ornette then in person? Was that through Byrne, or was that, how did you meet him?
So that was through photographer John Rogers. I knew that he knew Ornette, and I told him one day, excuse me, you know, if you're ever going up there, you know, I just put it out there to the universe.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like think that much of it or really think that anything like that would ever happen. And then one day he called and he was like, you know, come to this address. This is going down. And, you know, I always really appreciate that. And I mean, I was terrified, man.
Was it at Ornette's place?
Yeah, it was the one in Chelsea, in like the loft where he had the whole floor.
Okay.
And, you know, and when I first went in there, it was, I actually had a gig with Daniel Carter in a few hours. And it was so spontaneous. I got to meet Ornette, but I only had about an hour. And then I had to go because I didn't want to miss this. I didn't want to miss this gig with DC. He was a good friend of mine. So I told Ornette, I'm really sorry, man, but I gotta go, which is crazy. I got a chance to meet Ornette. I'm leaving, but before, one of the first things that Ornette did is he wanted to hear me play, and so I took out my bass clarinet, and I played something that was just inspired by him in general. And luckily for me, he really dug it. He was like, and he seemed to really be into my energy in general.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, come back anytime. And I was like, you know, I didn't know that he was that open. And if someone really wanted to learn harmolodics, that he would just go all the way.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, well, when should I, you know, how does that work? He was like, well, if you come by and I'm here, then it's supposed to happen. And,
Yes.
and if you come by and I'm not, it's not correct. So I was like, that's so metaphysical. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and figure that out.
Well, that's how it worked, though.
You know?
Yeah, no,
And then,
it's true.
and then because sometimes it would be with John. Other times I would just really like take a deep breath. I was like, I'm gonna see if Ornette's home. You know, like, and sometimes he was, and then and it was like everything was improv. Everything's improv. So I'm walking into something that you don't know who could be there, you don't know what's going on, you know what you're walking into. So that became kind of interesting. One time when I got there, he was about to have a pre-interview with Greg Osby. So I was like, well, man, I should leave. He goes, no. He goes, you're gonna do the interview with us. Like, I was like, what? So, I mean, all I did was sit on the couch, and I didn't actually engage in the interview between the two of them. But stuff like that would happen. But then that was really interesting because I got to observe and see Ornette in action, not just playing music, but see how he went about everything. And everything he did, I was trying to observe and learn and find out about him and how he did his thing. Because I couldn't believe that I was even sitting there in a room with him, you know? So the first thing he says to Greg Osby was, he goes, they were like, hey, okay, cool. He goes, Ornette goes, the major is white and the minor is black. He goes, do you agree? What do you think? First thing. So I think Greg was supposed to interview him, and that's how Ornette started it off. With like a deep philosophical thing. Right. Like boom. And I was like, okay, what's Greg gonna do? Like, how do you respond to something like that? But I was also like thinking about what he said. Yeah. I was like, man, that is, it wasn't long before he dropped the riddle on me, what's the tonic in the key of F? And like everybody else, I'm like, do I say F? Cause
right.
I tried to be slick. I was like, it's probably the flat 5. I was like, B. He was like, nah. I was like, all right, it has to be something that's just impossible. I was like, it's F sharp. Right? He was like, nope. And of course, the answer is you're the tonic. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm the tonic. And, I was like, I mean, that's a powerful lesson right there. But the thing that, the blessing, like the real thing that's really cool about Ornette for me is that even though he's gone, I still continue to learn about him and harmolodics. The past, just yesterday with you and Fred, hearing some of the things that he said that I hadn't heard before, after all this time, I finally have a better understanding of what he means when he says the unison. Yeah. I thought I had it figured out. I had my own interpretation of it, but now, after what you said earlier, I said, okay, now I see it. It's taken me a while to get there. And then what Fred said about play the bass like you're my trumpet player. I mean, man, this is gold, man. Yeah. Because I've wanted to break free and be more harmolodic in my own music, and it's taken me a while to find the right people and the right ways to go about it. And over the course of years, I've been able to piece by piece open it up more, like piece by piece take away the things that are holding it back, and try newer things that open it up, But at the core of it is the sanction to be yourself and believe in yourself is for me what harmolodics is. And William Parker says the same thing. He says he hires people to be themselves. And to me that's what I did a whole thesis on harmolodics on a technical perspective, but to me what the whole thing really comes down is to just be who you really are, but then the extension of that is no matter what. Like if people aren't feeling you, the public's not feeling you, whatever. What matters is that's you do you, and then all that other stuff is not as important as that. And that's a tough lesson sometimes. Yeah,
it's that thing of being yourself and then making that work in a social situation.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this blueprint for society thing,
Yeah.
It's capsuled in the whole thing too.
Yeah.
But beautiful. Well, I did want to give a shout out to your blog, No Sound Left Behind, which is been great for me because you've got some really nice stories and memories of Ornette in there, but from towards later years that I didn't get to see him as much. So it gives me a little window into what his thought process was like then, what he was doing. And I know you've turned this into a podcast now, so you'll be doing that soon too.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Well, you know, he had become very, I don't want to say very, but there was a spirituality, and I didn't know him when you did.
Yeah.
But the person that I encountered definitely had ideas of spirituality on his mind.
No, he could see through at those last years.
Yeah.
The veil was becoming thin for him.
Yeah.
You know?
Because one day I was doing a job as a foot messenger, and I was having the worst day ever. I mean, it was just raining. I was broke. I was walking around with a blister on my foot. I mean, it's like, and I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, what am I gonna do? I was like, I'm gonna call Ornette Coleman on the phone.
Yes.
Because I don't know what else to do right now. And I don't know what that was about, but I was like, I'm doing this. And I called him up, and one of the first things he said was, he goes, the soul is eternal. I was like, okay. I was like, all this stuff that I'm dealing with is not important. I was like, you know, and that's where he was. The soul is eternal.
That's right. Dial a prayer. Yes.
You know? And I was like, okay, you know. It brought me back, and also reminded me. I think we all have to be reminded sometimes that there's something else going on.
Yes, yes.
Like what we're about to do.
Yes. No,
something else.
No, very good. Oh, thank you. So while you've been talking, I've thought of 3 or 4 other stories. I thought, and you know what happened to me, but this is not my interview.
Right.
So later.
Yeah,
later.
to be continued.
Yes, yeah. So thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you, man.
And let's do this thing.
Let's do it.
That's it. All right.